This happened to me in December of 2004. I was 28 years old at the time, traveling solo across Southeast Asia after quitting my job in Chicago. I'd been burned out working in marketing for nearly a decade and I needed a reset. I'd saved for nearly a year to do this trip: Thailand, Malaysia, Sri, the Maldives. Just me, my backpack, a beat-up camera, and whatever room I could find along the way. That week, I'd made it to a small island off the west coast of Thailand. It wasn't tourist-heavy like Phuket. It had this raw, almost untouched vibe. I checked into a cheap beachside motel run by a middle-aged Thai couple who barely spoke English. The place was humble: 3 bungalows, a concrete reception shack, and a little bar made out of bamboo. I loved it immediately. I remember the air felt thick that whole week. Not just humid, heavy, like something was pressing down. The waves were rougher than usual, and the couple running the place kept flicking glances toward the ocean like they were waiting for something. On the night of the 25th, I sat by the beach with 2 Dutch backpackers and a couple from California. We were swapping travel stories, drinking cheap rum, and laughing under these huge stars. The couple, Becky and Josh, had surfboards propped up next to them. They said they were hopping to catch some waves early the next morning. Becky kept getting texts from someone back home, and I noticed she looked kind of nervous. When I asked if everything was okay, she shrugged and said, "My mom keeps saying something about weird news reports, but she's always paranoid." We laughed it off. I went to bed around 1 a.m. My bungalow was closest to the water, just a thin path of palm trees between me and the sea. The waves sounded louder than usual, but I was too buzzed and tired to care. At exactly 7:57 a.m., I woke up to silence. That's what jolted me: the complete lack of ocean noise. It was eerie, like someone had hit mute on the world. I got up and stepped outside barefoot. What I saw didn't register at first. The water was gone. Where the ocean used to be, there was nothing but wet sand and coral. Boats were sitting crooked in the mud. Fish flopped around in shallow puddles. It was like someone had drained the sea in the middle of the night. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Other guests were coming out of their rooms, squinting at the horizon. Josh, the surfer guy, actually started walking toward the exposed seabed, barefoot, camera in hand. I remember yelling, "Dude, what are you doing?" He laughed. "When will I ever see something like this again?" The Thai motel owner, whose name I never learned, came sprinting down the path yelling in Thai. Then, in broken English, he screamed, "Run, tsunami coming." That's when it hit me. I'd heard about tsunamis on the news, seen videos from Japan and Hawaii, but I never imagined I'd be in one. People started panicking. The Dutch backpackers ran straight into the trees behind the motel. I froze for a second too long. Then the ground beneath my feet started trembling. Not violently, more like a low, rhythmic thumping, like distant drums getting louder. I turned toward the ocean. That's when I saw the wall of water. It wasn't just a wave. It was like the ocean had turned into a vertical cliff, moving forward at the speed of a freight train. It had to be at least 30 feet high and getting bigger by the second. I turned and ran. There was no high ground nearby. This island was flat. The only option was deeper inland, toward the jungle. I sprinted barefoot across the dirt path, branches slapping my face, my legs screaming. Behind me, I heard the motel being ripped apart, the crash of wood and glass, a sound I'll never forget. Something huge hit me from behind, debris or maybe the water. I don't remember. I blacked out for a second. When I came to, I was underwater, tumbling like I was in a washing machine. I couldn't tell which way was up. I remember clawing at nothing, swallowing, thinking, this is it. Somehow, I surfaced, choking, gripping a piece of what used to be a bamboo fence. I was surrounded by chaos, trees snapped in half, suitcases floating past me, people screaming. I couldn't see anyone I recognized. I drifted for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes until I hit something solid, an uprooted tree lodged against a small hill. I dragged myself up and collapsed. When the second wave came, I was high enough to avoid the worst of it, but it still knocked me sideways, dragged the tree a few feet, and almost took me with it. I held on with everything I had. Eventually, the water receded. It left behind silence again. This time, it was the silence of death. The motel was gone. The beach was gone. Bodies were scattered across the sand, some alive, many not. I found Becky several hours later. She had a broken leg and was wedged between a coconut tree and a refrigerator. She was crying for Josh. We never found him. The Thai couple survived. They made it to the highest tree behind the property. The Dutch backpackers were gone, just gone. I was evacuated 3 days later by a helicopter. We were flown to a makeshift medical camp where volunteers from all over the world were trying to keep up with the wounded and displaced. There were more people than supplies, rows and rows of stretchers. I ended up flying back to the US a week later. I didn't speak much on the flight. The guy next to me kept asking where I'd been. I couldn't find the words. To this day, the sound of rushing water, whether it's a faucet or a river, makes my stomach drop. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I'm back in that bungalow, hearing the silence before the wave. I still have the camera I brought on that trip. It's water damaged and barely works, but I keep it as a reminder that I'm lucky to be alive. This happened in 2018 during a family vacation to Indonesia. My name is Taylor, I'm from Seattle, and I was 22 at the time. My parents surprised my younger sister and me with a trip to Bali over winter break. We were staying at this secluded oceanfront resort built into the side of a cliff. It was beautiful, private infinity pools, glass-walled suites, stone stairways that led down to a private beach. On the second day, we met another American family, the Millers. They had a daughter around my age named. She was one of those effortlessly cool people, tattoos, short hair dyed silver, always barefoot. We hit it off instantly. I remember thinking she seemed fearless. Said she had been backpacking solo across Indonesia for a few weeks before her parents flew in to meet her. She'd been sleeping in beach huts and hostels, getting by on barely anything. "You really should try traveling alone," she told me. "Makes you see who you really are." On December 22nd, we were all sitting at the clifftop bar watching the sunset. The sky was blood orange and the water below looked calm, like glass. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression shifted. "What's up?" I asked. She flipped the screen toward me. It was a message from someone saved as Cave Guy. All it said was, "Did you hear it? It's coming back. Tell your family to leave." I thought it was a joke, some inside thing between her and a friend, but's face had gone pale. She put the phone away quickly and said, "Never mind, some weirdo I met in Java," but I noticed how her hands were shaking. The next morning was gone. She hadn't told anyone she was leaving. The resort staff said they saw her hiking down the path toward the beach before sunrise. No one had seen her since. Her parents were frantic. The hotel helped call the local police, but no one took it seriously at first. People leave resorts without saying goodbye all the time, especially solo travelers. My family tried to continue our vacation like normal, but there was a heaviness in the air. Her name kept echoing in conversations and silence alike. I kept wondering about that text she'd gotten. On the night of the 24th, I couldn't sleep. I walked out onto our balcony and looked down at the beach. That's when I saw her. She was standing ankle deep in the water, just staring out. The moon was bright enough that I could see her clearly, but something about her body language was wrong, rigid, frozen. I almost called out, but something stopped me. Instead, I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture. Right then, the earth moved. It started subtle, like a rumble beneath my feet. Then it grew, shaking the entire building. Lights flickered. My sister screamed from inside. The earthquake lasted maybe 20 seconds, but it felt like forever. When it stopped, my parents ran out, and we immediately turned on the news. Indonesian channels were already reporting it, magnitude 7.5, epicenter in the ocean near Lombok. Then someone mentioned the word that made my blood run cold, tsunami. We were on a cliff, but just barely above sea level. I checked my phone again. The picture I'd taken of wasn't there, just static, glitchy pixels and a warped timestamp, 2:33 a.m., even though I'd taken it just after midnight. Then came the sirens. The resort had a protocol. Everyone was instructed to move to the uppermost floor of the main building. Staff in reflective vests came knocking, ushering us out quickly. The power kept flickering. Cell signal was dead. The craziest part, the ocean looked calm, completely flat. It didn't look like anything was wrong. At 3:05 a.m. we saw it. The water pulled back like a monster inhaling. Boats anchored far out were suddenly lying on sand. I watched the trees along the beach begin to bend, not from wind, but from pressure. Then came the roar. There's no way to describe that sound. It was like a freight train, but alive, angrier, louder, closer. Everyone screamed at once. The wave hit the beach in seconds. Even from our elevated position, the force was terrifying. Water tore through the bungalows, swallowed the palm trees, and crashed violently against the cliff base. A second wave came moments later, even taller, slamming into what was left of the shore. We thought we were safe, then we heard a crack. The foundation of one of the lower structures gave way. A chunk of it just broke off. People screamed as they grabbed onto anything to keep from sliding. The staff yelled for us to move higher. His parents were hysterical. Her dad kept shouting her name toward the ocean like she might answer. When the water receded, destruction was everywhere. Pools of seawater covered the courtyards. Furniture and tree limbs floated in and out of broken windows. The resort was declared unsafe. We were airlifted out 2 days later. Here's the part that haunts me. A few weeks after we returned home, I got a call from an Indonesian number. I didn't answer, but they left a voicemail. It was his voice. All she said was, "I warned you, but I had to stay." He was right, it came back. Then static. I still have the audio file saved on an old hard drive. Sometimes, late at night, I listen to it over and over, trying to figure out if it's really her or someone imitating her. They never found her body, not a trace. Part of me believes she knew exactly what was going to happen. That text from Cave Guy, I looked it up later. There's a network of fringe seismologists, amateurs who claim to predict tsunamis based on animal behavior and ocean sounds. Some of them live in caves along the coasts, supposedly listening to underwater frequencies. Maybe she met one of them. Maybe she listened. And maybe, just maybe, she stayed behind because she knew the ocean was hungry again. This happened to me in March of 2011, the same week the tsunami hit Japan. I was 34 years old, working as a technical advisor for a US-based company that manufactured underwater communication equipment. I'd been flown out to Okinawa to troubleshoot a malfunctioning underwater sonar system installed off the eastern coast. My background in oceanography, so I'd been on dozens of boats, rigs, and marine research vessels, but this trip would be the one I never forgot. We were docked in a small port town named about an hour northeast of Naha. The area wasn't as built up as Tokyo or Osaka. Most people there still fished for a living, and the harbor was lined with rusted boats and nets that looked decades old. My team consisted of 3 engineers from Tokyo and a local boat captain named, who barely spoke any English but had years of experience navigating the coastal waters. We spent 2 days installing new equipment on a buoy just offshore. On the morning of March 11th, I woke up to a strange vibration, different from an engine, deeper, like the ground itself was humming. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but when I stepped outside, I saw birds flying inland in huge, chaotic flocks. The harbor was unusually still. Captain was already outside, smoking nervously and scanning the sea. Around 2:45 p.m., we were on the boat heading toward the buoy when the earthquake struck. Even on the water, you could feel it. The boat shook violently and I saw the shoreline ripple like jelly. Power lines swayed, buildings seemed to shift sideways, and then radio silence. All comms went dead. Started yelling in Japanese, one of the Tokyo engineers translated. He says we need to head out, far out, open water, now. It sounded insane, running toward the sea during a natural disaster, but I remembered tsunami protocols. Boats near the shore get pulverized. Out in the deep water, tsunamis are barely noticeable, so we turned the boat around and gunned it straight toward the horizon. We kept pushing east farther and farther until land became a faint gray line behind us. Then the sky changed. It got darker, not night dark, but the kind of weird, greenish gray that makes everything look sick. Clouds moved fast overhead. The water turned from calm to choppy, then dead still again. That's when we saw the debris. First it was small things, wood planks, empty crates, bits of fishing nets, then entire tree trunks, then a floating vending machine. I'm not kidding, an entire Japanese soda machine bobbing in the middle of the ocean. We didn't feel a wave, no wall of water, but we realized what had happened. The tsunami had passed beneath us. On shore, it was wreaking havoc, but here, in deep water, it was just a ripple. Then we saw the lifeboat. It was bright orange, one of those emergency inflatable ones, drifting sideways among the wreckage. Spotted it first and changed course immediately. As we got closer, I could see a man inside. He was lying on his side, motionless. His face was pale, hair soaked, lips blue. We threw a rope, pulled the raft alongside our boat, and climbed in to check on him. He was alive, but barely, hypothermic, dehydrated, barely able to speak. We wrapped him in blankets and gave him a bit of water. I asked where he came from. He looked straight at me and whispered one word. That was over 300 kilometers north of us. No way. I assumed I'd misheard. One of the engineers asked him again in Japanese. He said the same thing. His name was, he had been on a cargo ship docked in the port when the tsunami hit. According to him, the entire ship was thrown inland by the wave. He was knocked unconscious, woke up floating on debris, and somehow ended up in a lifeboat. In less than 3 hours. It made no physical sense. We tried to radio it in, but communications were still down, so we headed back toward the harbor. Except something was wrong. The shoreline had changed. Where there had been buildings, now there was rubble. The entire front of the harbor was gone, boats overturned, docks ripped out, vehicles scattered like toys, and everything was eerily quiet. We anchored a distance away and used the inflatable to get closer. It was like walking through a graveyard, dead fish everywhere, dolls, a car flipped upside down with its horn still blaring weakly. We were lucky to find emergency responders setting up a mobile station a few blocks inland. We handed over, filled out a report, and gave our own statements. They didn't ask many questions. They were too overwhelmed with the dead and missing. A few days later, I tried to follow up on. No one knew who he was. There were no records of him at the port. No shipping manifests with his name. No missing persons report matching his face. Even the Coast Guard didn't know how to explain how he ended up that far south. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. One of the Tokyo engineers found something stuck to the side of the raft after we docked, wedged between the outer lining and a metal support pole. It was a photograph, wet, slightly torn, but still visible. A family portrait was in it, along with a woman and 2 kids. On the back, written in faded ink, was a date, March 11, 1993. 18 years before the tsunami hit. I keep that photo in a safe at home. Sometimes I look at it and wonder, who was he really? A survivor, a ghost of a memory, or just a man who'd already lost everything long before the wave even came? Nature has a way of bending time, space, even reason. The ocean gives and the ocean takes. And sometimes it returns things that should never come back.